Well, according to my Mickey Mouse watch, the big hand is on 12 and the little hand's on 5:01, actually. So, the Planning Commission of the City of Lancaster, please come to order. I've had a fun day, so I thought I'd try to insert something into the meeting, and it hasn't worked too well, so we'll just carry on. Tonight we have an invocation to be offered by Pastor John Williams, I believe. He is here. Welcome. And then Commissioner Harvey will lead us in the pledge. So if we'd all please stand.
All right, let's pray together. Lord, we thank you so much for giving us this day as a gift. Lord, I pray now that you will bless this meeting. We thank you, Lord, for Lancaster. We thank you for our families, our schools, Lord, our city leaders, Lord, all of our law enforcement, and Lord, personnel that responds to emergencies, God. And we thank you so much for our churches and our businesses. We pray your blessing upon this city. And God, I pray now again as this agenda has gone through that you will be honored and glorified. Lord, as we think right on the heels of Easter, what a wonderful weekend. Thank you that we serve you as our risen Savior. And we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please remain standing and join us as we honor our nation's flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor. Have the roll call, please.
Commissioner Diana Cook.
Present.
Commissioner Miguel Coronado. Absent. Commissioner Cassandra Harvey.
Present.
Commissioner Drew Mercy.
Present.
Commissioner Sandy Smith.
Here.
Vice Chair Randy Hall.
Here.
Chairman James Vose.
Here.
We have a quorum.
We do. Thank you. Public business from the floor. If individuals are unable to stay for the entire meeting, we offer a short period of time now to address the commission on any agendized item. Do we have any early speakers?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Then anyone who would like to address the commission on any agenda item will be called upon when that agenda item is brought before the commission. We ask you to please fill out a speaker's card if you'd like to address us tonight, and you would be given 3 minutes to address the commission, unless you're the applicant, and the applicant is given as much time as we'll tolerate to present their case, and then if the public has any comments to make, or staff, the applicant would have an opportunity to also to rebut. Just a little background. The commission meets twice a month, usually regularly the week prior to this meeting, where we meet with staff in this chamber. It's a public meeting, however, we do not deliberate. We get staff input relative to the proposed agenda. We offer our individual comments and questions. However, we don't vote nor deliberate. But it is a public meeting. For the record, we've received a number of correspondence on items 5A, 5C, 5D, and item 7. We've received what's called uncontested letters, which are letters that indicate the applicant has agreed to all the terms and conditions as indicated on the recommendation by staff. We have not received, however, a uncontested letter on item 5B. At least it's not in our packet. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. We also received, which was posted to the website, 2 modifications three modifications. Agenda item 3 is a addition on page 8 on item 7, a site plan that we had asked for, and on item 9, an amendment to page 1. The first action item is consent calendar, which is the approval of the minutes of our regular meeting of March 20th. Have a motion, please.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from March 20th.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Anything further from anyone? Please vote. In a minute, now.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. All right, the next items are continued public hearings. These are hearings that were held previously and were continued for various reasons. Item number 2 is conditional use permit 15-08 and tentative tract map number 72534. Then the recommendation is to continue the matter to May 15th. Does staff have anything else you want to add?
No, I can give a brief staff report describing the project if you wish, but otherwise, applicant has requested it to be moved
All right.
to next month.
Yeah, we've heard the staff report before, unless somebody else wants to hear it again. Nope? Okay, thank you. All right, then it would be appropriate to consider a motion to continue to May 15th.
I'll make the motion to continue to May 15th, 2017, regular meeting for additional time to modify the design.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All right, anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. The next item is a continued public hearing as well on the modification of the building placement and setback requirements in the city's commercial zone. This is a public hearing to receive testimony on this matter and possible action. So the public hearing is open. Do we have speakers, Mr. Ludicky?
I have no speakers on the item, Mr. Chairman.
All right. I know we had some discussion or some questions at the last meeting that I think folks were satisfied with. Anything further from the members? No? Okay. And nothing from the public? All right. It'd be appropriate to close the public hearing without objection and consider a motion.
I move that we adopt Resolution 1704, recommending to the City Council approval of an ordinance amending Title 17 of the Lancaster Municipal Code, modifying building setback requirements in the CNOP zones.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Anything further? A lot of hard work went into this, that's for sure. But
Yes, and some assistance from one of our consultants, which I appreciate.
yeah, we appreciate it very much. This goes along with our modification of the parking regulations and eventually the master plan for streets, right?
Yes, all of those things are kind of being brought into alignment, which I think is a good thing from the city's standpoint.
Very good. Thank you. All right, anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0, and we'll let you know when that's scheduled for the City Council.
Very good, thank you. And the third continued public hearing is safe routes to school. So the public hearing is open on this. Do we have speakers?
You do have one speaker, Mr. Chairman.
All right, could we then have a brief staff report then, please?
Chairman, members of the commission, the Safe Routes to School plan is a citywide plan that the city has actually been working on for approximately 3 years. It was funded by 2 different grant programs. We had very, very good involvement from all 4 of our affected school districts. That would be the Antelope Valley Union High School District, as well as the West Side Union School District, Lancaster School District, and the East Side School District. And what the plan does is it sets forth a Safe Routes to School individual plan, if you will, for every public school within the city, including the high schools, including Soar High School. And it is really intended to be something that the city can use, number one, in working towards grant programs, getting funding for things that will make the situation around our schools safer for students who bike or roll or walk. And certainly, as you've probably seen if you've looked at the plan at all, indications of, I think I went through and I believe at every school location, speeding was identified by parents, faculty, as a major problem around all of our schools. So as we continue to work through not only the Safe Routes to School effort, but our Complete Streets master plan, this is something that I think we'll keep in mind and continue to work on the design of our streets for that effort. Our Architectural Design Commission did spend several months looking at this. They have recommended approval of the plan. We are recommending to the commission that you, if you're satisfied with it in its current form, that you adopt the resolution recommending to the council the adoption of this citywide plan.
All right, thank you. Reviewing the plan, there is quite a consistency of intersection revision designs, crosswalk designs, limit line setbacks further from the crosswalk, and 3-lane streets often suggested that they be reduced to 2-lane plus a bike lane, which tends to modify speeds. However, I wouldn't want to attempt to try to define how speed limits are set. However, speed limits within a school zone are set by state law, right?
That is correct. So the California Vehicle Code sets during school hours the speed limit at 25. It can be different when it's not school hours, but at 25 during school hours.
In some other jurisdictions, not in the state of California, but in some other jurisdictions, Texas and Nevada and other places, it's as low as 10 miles per hour, 15 miles per hour in a school zone, no matter when, with or without children present, which is interesting, including what some might call speed bumps, slowing traffic down. However, that would take a code change, not here in this jurisdiction, but it would take a state code change, wouldn't it?
Correct.
So the city does not have the authority to modify the state law below that speed limit.
That is correct.
Okay. Would you mind, I don't know how to ask you this, would you please tell us briefly how speed limits are set other than in school zones?
So for roads that are dictated by the California Vehicle Code, speed limits are set at what's called the 85th percentile. So we're required to go out and do a survey of that road segment, and if we were to survey 100 cars, the speed limit would be the speed at which 15 cars drove faster than and 85 cars drove slower than. That would become your 85th percentile speed, and that's what the speed limit's based on.
So, for instance, a 50 mile per hour posted speed street, goodness, and you went and surveyed it and you came up with a different result. that said it was 65, then what's the obligation of the jurisdiction to set the speed limit?
If we want the speed limit to be enforceable by law, it would now be 65. And in the state, we actually cap the maximum speed limit at 65 for a freeway type street.
Right. So, the Planning Commission doesn't have the authority to do anything about speed limits. City Council does, but they're precluded from setting speed limits outside of the method you just defined,
That
the
is
85%
correct.
method.
That is correct. If
They
they
just-
want it to be
They
enforceable.
just cannot set it, well, they can, but then they can't enforce it.
That is correct.
So,
And that's why plans like this are so important, because it allows us to implement techniques that can make the surveys come in lower and speed limits thus become lower.
so it's enforceable by utilizing this methodology.
Correct.
Go ahead.
So planning can make changes to the roadway that make people not want to drive 65.
Correct.
So then it would have kind of a roundabout way of slowing things down, and that's what the Safe Streets to School does with their different sidewalk treatments and stuff.
That is correct. You add more side friction or, narrow the lanes down. There's different techniques that these plans are implementing, which will then, make people not feel comfortable driving as fast. Then the next time we go out and do the survey, the 85th percentile speed will come in lower.
I like to point out Valley Central Way as an example of how well that worked. It slowed traffic down remarkably, and it actually, when I drive there now, I feel comfortable driving there. Before, it was always nerve-wracking. So these changes we can make are helpful. And in Valley Central Way, didn't it actually improve traffic flow?
Well, I don't know about traffic flow, but there's no congestion out there now that I'm aware of. But I do know that if you look at the accident data, accidents are down pre and post implementation of that.
Thank you.
And particularly on the curvilinear design of that street and the ability to observe making turn movements either in or out of driveways. It's, the slower the traffic speed, the safer it is for folks driving and transitioning in and out of parking lots, seems to me. Very good. Well, thank you for the primer. We appreciate that. All right?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
On the survey that you do for the 85 percentile, how often do you do that survey? Is it only one time? Is it different times of the day? Is it repeated before you come to the conclusion so that it's enforceable?
California Vehicle Code requires us to do it every 5, 7, and 10 years. And at 5 and 7 years, the traffic engineer of the particular agency with jurisdiction over the street can determine that the survey that was previously done is still valid. But at the 10-year mark, we are required to go out and resurvey that segment.
Very good. Anything further? All right. Well, thank you. We have a speaker.
Fran Sarasaris.
Good evening, Fran. Welcome.
Thank you. I got to grow a little bit to reach. No, just kidding. Thank you. Oh, bless you. Yeah, I think so. Good evening, Chairman Voss, my Chairman Hall, and commissioners, staff, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Fran Sarasaris. I mainly want to say thank you to you, the Planning Committee, and the Lancaster Street Maintenance people for putting and doing a fine job of striping and putting the crosswalk striping and putting the flashing lights on Jackman. It has made quite a bit of difference. The speed of the drivers have slowed down, and I noticed that when they come to where the striping is for handicapped to cross, they do stop, most of them do stop and caution a little bit more. And so it has proven to be effective, and I wanted to thank you all.
No, thank you. Don't thank us.
Thank you.
These are the folks that do the heavy lifting.
They did a wonderful job. They did a wonderful job.
Somebody know who that is? All right. Anything further on this item number 4?
Chairman Bose, did
Go
you
ahead.
get all the stuff corrected that you had on that?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So it's appropriate to consider a motion on item number 4.
I move that we adopt Resolution Number 17-05, recommended to the City Council approval of the City of Lancaster Safe Routes to School Master Plan.
Second?
Thank you. All right. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Next item is item number 5, which are, I should say, items number 5A through D, which are new public hearings. So without objection, the public hearing's open on these items. 5A, this is conditional use permit 06-08 and tentative parcel map 72532. Request is for a 1-year extension. Do we have speakers on this item?
The applicant has put in a
All right.
slip, Mr. Chairman.
May we have the brief staff reports then, please?
Chairman Vose, Commissioners, this is a request for a 1-year extension of tentative parcel map 72532 and conditional use permit 0608 for a subdivision of 10 commercial parcels and a construction of a 395,000 square foot commercial shopping center at the southeast corner of Avenue L and 60th Street West. This would be their second of 3 1-year extensions and would take the expiration date to May 19th, 2018. There is one modification to the conditions. It's to condition number 6. We have reduced the ultimate right-of-way for Avenue L from 120 feet to 100 feet to more accurately reflect the current needs of the city. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
You said May 18th rather than March 15th is noted on the agenda?
No, it's to May 19th, 2018.
May 19th, 2018.
Correct.
Okay. Is there a typo on the agenda? Okay. It's the same- Okay, yeah, I just can't read. Told you it's been a great day. So, with the change in the offsite on Avenue L, the reduction in setback, which in effect gives the opportunity to expand the development envelope. Would that be correct?
The development envelope could expand, however, it can't be greater than what was approved, so it can't be bigger than the 395,000 square feet and change. It could just be configured slightly different.
Unless?
Unless they would come back and modify their site plan.
Which would mean a new conditional use permit or a minor mod?
I mean, it would depend on what they were proposing to do.
Okay. So there could be an opportunity to expand the building envelope, depending on how it's presented.
There is, but they wouldn't be able to exceed what was currently approved without redoing to a certain extent their environmental.
Well, let me ask you this. If we're reducing the or the dedication of right-of-way and that Avenue L improvement, we're not going to sit there with a 20-foot undeveloped.
No, they can build up to the edge of their property line, so up to
Which-
the area where they're dedicated. They simply cannot build more square footage than they were entitled to build.
Which would require a modification site plan no matter what.
If they wanted to build it in above what was,
No. You got to modify the site plan because you got to gain 20 feet, no matter what you do, right?
that would be done during
Yeah.
building plan review.
Say yes.
Yes.
There we go. Anyway, it's a good thing,
Sometimes you gotta lead the witness.
maybe. All right. Anything further from anyone before we have a speaker?
Yes, the applicant.
All right. Mr. Lane is going to speak to us. Who is going to speak to us? You can bring your grandson, or he can come up here and watch you.
Younger Mr. Lane.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Lanes everywhere, Mr. Lane.
Yeah, George Lane. Thank you for your patience with the young one right there. And truly, this project, it's been going for some time, but unfortunately, like a lot of projects, when we had the Great Recession in the Antelope Valley, that just put a stop, and it's truly been a lifelong project right there. So, yeah, we're just optimistic that things are going to go forward. But thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Lane. We'd like to see the project develop, that's for sure. All right. Anyone else?
No other speaker cards.
All right. Thank you. Anything from the members? So we'll close the public hearing without objection. Consider a motion.
I move to grant a one-year extension to May 19th, 2018, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised conditional use permit conditions.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. All right. I breathed on the iPad and it changed direction on me, so bear with me. We've moved into the electronic age, some of us quicker than others. Item 5B, tentative parcel map number 69578. The public hearing is open on this item. Do you have speakers?
I have no speaker card for this one, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, but we did not receive a uncontested letter. However, doesn't matter.
I can give a brief staff report if you would like.
You can.
Okay.
This is a
Tentative parcel map number 69578. This is a request for a one-year extension. It's the second of 3 available extensions to them. The proposed project is located on approximately 2.55 gross acres at the northwest corner of 37th Street West and Avenue L6. It's a subdivision for 4 single-family lots in the SRR zone. There have been no changes to the conditions that were adopted for this project. And if you have any other questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
all right, thank you. Anyone? No speakers? All right, we'll close the public hearing without objection. Consider a motion.
I move we grant a one-year extension to March 15th, 2018, based on findings contained in staff report and subject to the revised condition list, attachment to resolution number 10-07.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. All right, next item is item 5C, which is tentative tract map number 61921. The public hearing is open on this item without objection. Do we have speakers?
No speakers, Mr. Chairman.
Speakers, we have an uncontested letter. Anyone care to hear a staff report? No? All right then. It's appropriate to close the public hearing without objection and consider a motion.
I move that we grant a one-year extension to April 17th, 2018, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised conditions list, attachment to resolution number 06-31.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. This is the last extension. All right, anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Uh, 5D is tentative tract map number 62120. So without objection, public hearing's open on this item. Do we have speakers?
No speakers cards, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone care to hear staff report again? Again and again? No? All right. And no speakers, so without objection, we'll close the public hearing and consider a motion.
I move that we grant a one-year extension to May 22, 2018, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised condition list, attachment to resolution number 06-33.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. This is the last extension on this map as well, right?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Item number 6, this is conditional use permit number 1705. This is a public hearing, so we'll open the public hearing without objection. Pardon? Yeah. So I recall a member at our briefing asked why this is being delayed for some reason.
This is 1705 is a proposed banquet hall facility for private catered events, and staff is requesting a continuance of this project until the May 15th Planning Commission in order to do some additional research.
All right, very good. And there's no speakers on this?
No speakers, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right, very good. Okay, so the recommendation is to continue, and that would be the motion, and public hearing would remain open until May 15th.
I move that we grant a continuance to the May 15, 2017 Planning Commission meeting to conduct additional research.
Thank you.
I second.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is conditional use permit number 17-09. So the public hearing is open on this item. Have speakers on this?
No speakers on this item, Mr. Chairman.
No, no speakers. All right. I had asked to see a floor plan, which staff was kind enough to provide. However, I'm at a loss to try to determine where the service bar is located in support of the application.
My understanding is that it's within the kitchen area. There's a service area off of the kitchen in the back, along with the walk-in cooler.
Which kitchen?
There is no public bar.
Okay, so we have old kitchen and kitchen on the site plan.
Yeah. We're talking about the new, not the old kitchen labeled area, but the kitchen labeled area. This is the site plan they used for their ABC application.
I understand. So the service bar that would prepare the distribution of spirits as would be in the kitchen area, and the beer and wine is dispensed from the same area and from reaching
Correct.
boxes?
Correct. There is no separate bar area from which they serve drinks.
So there's no taps, there's no nothing out in the dining area, huh?
Not that I'm aware of, and I've been there before.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all I had. Anybody have anything? No? All right. No speakers?
No speakers.
All right, be appropriate to close the public hearing without objection. Consider a motion.
I move to adopt resolution number 17-10, approving conditional use permit number 17-09.
A second.
Thank you. All right, anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Next item is item number 8, which is an amendment to the Lancaster Municipal Code, Title 16, to allow approval of multi-year extension requests for tentative maps, tentative tract maps and parcel maps. So without objection, the public hearing is open on this item. This is an item that the City Council had asked us to consider, and we heard staff's report last time. Do we have speakers on this item?
I have no speaker cards on it, Mr. Chairman.
All right, very good. Do members have any questions, comments? So, if a map, the bulk of the maps we've been looking at extending one-year timeframes were either approved in 2005, 2006, 2007 for the bulk of them over the last year or two, initially.
Correct.
And then through Planning Commission action and state action, those maps were extended. Their lives were extended until 2016, 17, 18, depending on our action as well as the state's action.
Yes.
Put it all in the basket, if you will.
Yes.
So, and the bulk of the remainder of tentative tract maps yet to expire beyond 2018 are very few, a handful maybe.
Yes, that's correct. For most of the active tentative maps that are out there, they have less than 3 years worth of extension time available to them under the municipal code.
Typically 2 or 1.
Correct.
So the consideration of this recommendation of the City Council, and should the City Council adopt it, and it becomes codified 3 months from now, whenever, whatever the process is. There may be a handful of maps that could avail themselves of this request. However, it would be less than 3 years, most likely. This opportunity would probably address new maps.
Yes, its effect is going to be a lot more noticeable on maps that are approved going forward rather than those that exist out there now.
Now, does it oblige the commission to grant an extension beyond 1 year or 2 years or 3 years? I mean, is it still discretionary on part of the commission?
Yes, it is. And in the language of the code, particularly under number A, the onus of the length of time, we would expect that an applicant would make that request for the length of time that they wanted.
Initially, after the initial 2 years?
Yes.
Okay.
So most of our tentative track maps that we've looked at have had minor and sometimes major changes in the streets. And that was one of the reasons why we have the update processes. So if there was a general plan amendment or update, that we would bring these track maps up to that new standard. So if we do grant 3 years, it would be before the next general plan update. So that would lead into when would be the next general plan update.
I can't tell you sitting here when the city will update its general plan again in terms of a comprehensive look. It was alluded to earlier on the city's master plan of complete streets. That, which we expect to be completed sometime this year, will also include a fairly major revision, for instance, of the city's physical mobility element, as it's called. I think from the standpoint of, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think your question is kind of getting to the point of okay, we approve a map under one set of conditions, and then sometime before its expiration date, the city changes its approach to something. And of course, we've been doing that pretty significantly over the past few years. Under this scenario, if you had a new map coming in, you still have that point at that 2-year expiration to, make the changes, even if they were to request a total aggregate extension at one time of 3 years. But alluding to what Chairman Vos said also, the commission still has discretion. The city still has discretion in how many or what length of time it wants to grant extensions for. There may be a situation where, in your scenario, suppose someone were to get approval of a map sometime this year. 2 years from now, the city is entering knows it's going to enter some kind of major general plan revision. Perhaps the commission at that point would say, we're not comfortable giving you 3 years because we may change the requirements as a result of our revisions to the general plan. So our intent is to give you 2 years or 18 months or 12 months instead, so that we can have the discretion to look at them later. So you haven't lost the ability to weigh that kind of factor into the extension, or what kind of extension you grant. But what this would allow you to do is, in situations where you don't foresee any kinds of changes, or the map essentially has been modified to meet the city's current expectations, you could grant the 3 years, and then the applicant is done with their extension request. We're done looking at it from a city standpoint.
So if we did grant the 3 years, in a hypothetical situation and something changed, we couldn't go back?
No, there wouldn't be any way to go back at that point. They
So
would
it's
be able to.
similar to the current maps. If you had the opportunity to extend, you negotiate the modifications.
Correct.
So, for instance, if an applicant blocked at the master plan for trails, for instance, as a condition of an extension, then the commission would have the opportunity to say no.
Correct.
So there is some leverage.
Yes.
We've not had that happen, but.
No, but it has happened within the state of California.
Oh, it's certain.
Yeah.
Well, the purpose of the MAP Act, or MAP Acts, there's the Subdivision Lands Act, and anyway, whatever. The purpose is to get a tentative tract map approved and move to final and build it. I mean, that's the whole purpose of it. The legislature, in their infinite wisdom, has allowed extensions and allowed local government to adopt these types of ordinances to allow that. But in some jurisdictions, you get 2 years, thank you, you're done. If you don't go to final, too bad.
Yes.
So, I mean, in a lot of cases, it's a waste of staff's time to keep reconsidering the same maps over and over and over and over, even though you get a fee that supposedly covers your cost. I'm not sure that it does.
Yeah, I would say that it probably, if it does, it's barely covering it. I guess one other final thing I would say is that it's a little bit hard to sit and look at the extension process right now because what the effect of the state having essentially granted 7 years of automatic extensions has sort of twisted up the whole tentative map process. Under any normal circumstance, the maps that you're looking at now would have expired, 3 or 4 years ago.
Long ago.
Right, and I honestly think that part of the reason for the time limits that exist in the MAP Act were originally this idea that, okay, a city can reasonably foresee, say, 2 years in the future and say, yes, this complies with what we're looking at doing. But I don't think the MAP Act ever envisioned a city trying to look a decade in the future, which is essentially what we've done on some of our maps, and say, yes, we know that 10 or 12 years from now, this is what we want. So
It's actually 13 years, 14 years. If there were 2006 with a 7-year extension, plus 3 more, adds up.
correct, yes.
Okay. So, bottom line is, it's not automatic, it's still discretionary.
Correct. Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Anything further? No speakers on this?
No.
All right. Then be appropriate to close the public hearing without objection and consider a motion.
I move that we adopt Resolution 17-11, recommending to the City Council approval of the ordinance amending Title 16 of the Lancaster Municipal Code to modify the extension provisions for approved tentative parcel and tract maps.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All right, ready to vote? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Next item is a public hearing on the amendment to the Lancaster Municipal Code, Title 17, providing regulations for grazing of animals. So the public hearing is open on this item without objection. The commission asked to have this item brought forward and to consider. Do we have speakers on this?
I have no speaker cards on this, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So could we have just a brief staff report again on this so we're all clear on what
Sure.
what is being proposed?
Okay. The city's zoning ordinance under section 17.08.050 permits light agricultural uses as an accessory use within the RR 2.5 and the RR1 zones. These light agricultural uses include the grazing of livestock such as sheep, goats, and cattle. However, no regulations are provided to clarify when and in which instances grazing is permitted. The only other place in the city's municipal code where grazing of animals shows up is a reference that prohibits grazing in city parks. The proposed amendment would add section 17.08.185, grazing, to clearly identify where grazing can occur and the responsibility of those grazing their livestock. This includes a prohibition of free-range grazing, written property owner permission, and requirements to ensure that dust control issues are managed. I forwarded this information to the Air District at your request. They have reviewed it, and they have no comments or concerns. And I'd be more than happy to answer any other questions.
Very good, thank you.
This amendment to the regulation was in response to the drought and the amount of damage that grazing animals would do to the ground cover that we tried so diligently to plant.
I believe that was part of the concern that the chairman brought up.
And in the agenda review, I asked about fines, and you said that this would be code enforcement. It would just give them the ability to say,
Right, having this information in the code gives code enforcement the ability to deal with any violations or issues that are created, and that could include fines.
and there's no chance that we're going to buy any kind of cattle trucks or anything like that to go round them up.
There's no chance of what?
That we'll buy trucks to go round up from recalcitrant shepherds out there that don't want to move their sheep.
I don't believe so. I believe that would be something that code enforcement would deal with, and I guess if it got to be really bad, code enforcement could round up the cattle. I'm hoping that wouldn't be the case.
Me too.
Mr. Lane left, but we could always ask Justin if he'd, volunteer to help us if that happens. I mean,
Well, it could be a nice rodeo feature.
it could be, yeah. Maybe Johnny Z would do it. It's possible. We've got a lot of friends out there could help. It's a serious issue, and overgrazing of the bare land here, and particularly with sheep, where they eat the vegetation down past the dirt, and then we get high winds, which then exacerbates the dust problem. But the current code, the way the code is currently written, you can't graze in R1 zones currently.
So the way the code is currently written, it just says light agricultural uses are allowed
So,
within the RR1 and the RR 2.5.
which would,
But beyond
my
that,
understanding would be if it's allowed in one and not mentioned, it's then not allowed in others.
right, and it specifically says in the residential code that it is only for RR1 and RR 2.5, so it doesn't allow it like at agricultural uses in the SRR.
I guess the concern I have is that assuming we adopt this and the city council takes it up and 2 months later it becomes an ordinance. In the interim, if with the high vegetation growth in residential land, particularly on the west side, in the R1 zones and the specific plan areas, where you typically see free-range grazing going on in the spring, summer time. I mean, we've got to have something in place so we can control that.
So currently, there would
maybe the opportunity could be that I know you're looking at some environmental documents on some large residential tracts out west. Maybe a phone call to those owners just to remind them that
we can,
allowing free ranging, maybe they shouldn't.
And those tracts are actually zoned urban residential, and it's not allowable in those areas.
Right, but they might need to be reminded. So
I can do that.
there's revenue to allow to a landowner to allow grazing. I mean, if you get permission, but at any rate, I'm just concerned about the impacts, and particularly after all we went through with the Antelope Acres hearings and so forth.
Yeah, it is pretty lush out there at the moment.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Anything further? All right, may we have, we'll close the public hearing on this and then consider a motion.
I move that we adopt Resolution 17-12, recommending to City Council approval of the ordinance amending Title 17 of the Lancaster Municipal Code to provide regulations for grazing of animals.
Thank you.
I second.
Second, thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. New business. These are not considered public hearings, however, we'll take public testimony if offered, right? Okay. So number 10 is alcohol, convenience, and necessity. Staff is seeking clarification on the information that the commission would like to see in staff reports for alcohol conditional use permits, if any. And you provided us with your memorandum. And others, some may have notes, I'm not sure. Do you have speakers on this?
Yes, you have one speaker's card.
Oh, okay, good. Let's hear from the speakers, or speaker.
Steve Kinsey.
Mr. Kinsey. Afternoon and welcome.
Thank you very much. I actually thought the comments came after you guys discussed, so I was going to, if you said anything that I had questions about, I was going to question at that time, but I'm just here to mostly listen to what you have to say, and then if I was going to question anything later, if there were any questions.
Okay, so
Otherwise, I'm good.
if you want to chat with us after we have our discussion, that's what you'd prefer to do?
If need be.
If necessary?
Yes.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Coronado is joining us. Afternoon. All right. So, anyone have anything?
Well, the stuff in agenda review that we talked about, I don't know the feasibility of having a citywide audit of the different places. So, like the last one that we looked at for the Circle K on Division and K, we had to drive and look. And because sometimes 500 feet just doesn't quite cut it. If we had a full overview of what was sold where and how much and that thing, I think that would be helpful. Also, too, it would also be interesting to see historical crime rates, to see how they've changed around those areas that we okayed CUPs for alcohol, if they've changed at all or gone down or gone up. And then there's always a waiver that has to come sometimes. Somebody's a foot or two close to a school or something, and then the language on why we should have a waiver, there's like, what, 2 reasons for that: convenience, and then it doesn't do harm to the other property. Maybe break that down, convenience and how it's convenient, and then do harm to other property and how it would be harmful to the other property. That would be helpful for me in the future when I look at granting waivers on a CUP for alcohol that needs the waiver. If it doesn't need the waiver, then the other stuff would still be helpful.
I don't see any of those as being an issue. We can definitely give you an overview of users, maybe like within a mile of a proposed project. Doing a citywide one in the staff report, it's going to be a little difficult.
Well, I mean, just have a citywide one that you would constantly update, and then, of course, like you suggested, probably within half mile or a mile, I think
Okay.
that would be. 'Cause the city's divided up nicely into little square mile grids, so that might be helpful to keep it into that general area.
Okay, and
Aren't
then
the reporting zones oddly configured in our community? Whatever they call them, crime reporting zones or whatever,
Reporting districts.
reporting districts.
Yes, they are oddly shaped.
They're, I won't say the word gerrymandered, they're just odd.
but we can definitely give you the crime statistics for the area in which a use is proposed.
For me, that's exactly what I would want for that particular area. I guess we'd have to set up whatever that threshold would be, whether that's a mile, 2 miles, half mile. But for me, that would be enough.
Okay.
And some applications are exempt because of where they're located in the first place, exempt from
Correct.
these reviews. And this particular, the conditional use permit.
So, for example,
You still get a conditional use.
There aren't waiver requirements for restaurants in the downtown specific plan.
Right. But they still require a conditional use permit.
Correct.
But there's no waiver because of distance. They could be side by side by side, and often are.
Restaurants citywide do not need a waiver requirement from distance. That
Right.
doesn't exist.
Okay. You know, and I hate to, I don't want to, it's hard not to discuss previous applications but that's all we really have to compare to. You know, understanding when people make presentations, whether it's applicants or the community, and, you know, who they are and where they come from. I mean, that's for us to judge. If they have conflicts of interest potentially, and we're not aware of it, well, we're not aware of it, so we make the best decisions we can. However, sometimes that can affect outcomes. When you look at 174250, it gives us the three findings that we're obliged to make. And the third finding references us to 174260, which talks about the duplication of services, over-concentration of beverage establishments, that sort of thing. They tie together. Clearly, they tie together. One doesn't function without the other. Right? And in our judgment, whatever it is, ultimately, if the applicant doesn't like the findings and determination of the commission, they have the ability to appeal. Or any other citizen can appeal the approval of the commission, whether it's for or against. Right? But it's really difficult. I mean, the words are here in 1742-050B. It alludes to proposed alcohol beverage establishments, but it only calls out other uses, but not other alcohol beverage operations. That's addressed in 060. That's the way it's written. So you have to take them together. One could assume that 050 is, all you have to do is make that finding and you're home free. In reality, 060 ties to it completely. And that's what we spent nearly 2 hours going through the last time. Right? Every item, I think, we did on 060.
Yes, essentially, as a commission, you went, I wouldn't say item by item, but you covered the items that were listed in 060, yes.
But I don't know how we get our arms around what I consider sensitive uses, receptors, if you will, neighbors. I don't know how we say, well, if it's 327 feet, boy, it's a problem, but if it's 328, no problem. I don't know how I don't think we can do that. I really don't. Or if someone purports it's a veterans operation and it happens to be a child care facility, staff needs to be on their toes to know what's being presented and how it's being presented, because if we don't know, we're going to be making decisions based on testimony that may not be accurate. And I don't know how you get around that either. Right? So. Say again?
Yeah. And that's what happened. I mean, they're talking about the veterans facility, and I'm Googling trying to really see what it is. And that's unfortunate that we have to do that.
Well, yeah, in future, there is a proposed development that could house veterans, but not totally veterans. It's a portion of the project, proposed project. But again, it's what we're aware of, and how we're made aware of it. Or if a speaker has an interest in an adjacent property that sells a product that is being considered for approval and is suggesting that it shouldn't be approved, or whatever.
Is that what we're saying that could have happened in the past?
Could have, yeah, maybe in the recent past. Quite possible.
Going back to last month's agenda, it says the request for waiver. It's a small paragraph, and it says the waiver requires two findings are made. First, that the alcohol beverage establishment will serve a specific community need, and second, that the distance waiver approved by alcoholic beverage established is not expected to result in any adverse effect. I think that Chairman Bowe's pointing out that 060 brings out the detail, but specifically when it says request for waiver, it would be nice if it said the waiver requires that two findings are made. First, that it serves a specific need by, and then that the distance waiver approved 327 feet versus 328 feet. Something like that. Some justification in there, because as Commissioner Smith said, that she's up here Googling on her phone and wondering what's around that area. So possibly expanding that a little bit.
We'll expand the staff report on the next alcohol one and go from there. And if we get it right, you can let us know. That would be great if we're still missing stuff.
Well, you guys are doing a great job. I know nobody's suggesting you're not. It's a matter of, particularly on these on the ones that become contentious. We just need to have our decisions on really solid ground. More information is never a problem, although we don't want to create extra work either. So I don't know how to manage that. That's Mr. Ludike's challenge, right, Mr. Ludike?
Sure. I'm also the original author of the ordinance, so.
Of the ordinance in the first place?
Yes. Written in 2008, I believe.
It's been a long time.
It has. And although not really the subject of this discussion, ultimately ordinances are crafted to hopefully reflect the values of the community in regards to the issues that are in front of them, and at times those can be changed. We've seen that example 8 miles south of us,
right?
Where the city of Palmdale, in its most recent revision to alcohol, its alcohol ordinance, took away all of the distance requirements in what you might call its regional commercial core, the mall and all of that area. They used to have distance requirements. They just ran into situations where they were having to look at waivers every time they had something come before them. And they finally made the decision, no, this is where we want these kinds of businesses to be able to locate. They took the distance waiver away. We essentially made that same judgment downtown when we did the ordinance originally, said, no, this is an area where we want to encourage, uses that at times have alcohol associated with them. Mr. Kinsey's business, for example. And we didn't want to have the distance requirements, be a factor in that area. So, yeah, there's this larger kind of value system, if you will, that hopefully translates itself into the ordinance.
Very good. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just add, I think especially when we're working with the applicants and getting a clear, letting them know the importance of making their case very clear, especially when it involves a waiver. And there's two different standards when it fits the ordinance pretty clearly, and then if they're asking for a waiver, they need to present something really compelling to in my mind, to be able to decide, okay, even though you don't fit, you provide something else. And so as much that can be really presented, and some of this is on the applicant, but again, almost point by point, on that list, how it justifies a waiver, I think is helpful.
Yeah, and I get very frustrated by, usually the argument I feel like I hear all the time is convenience, convenience. And I don't think it applies 99% of the time. And that's usually the applicant telling us that, not staff, for us to justify the waiver. It seems like it's always convenience, but it's clearly not.
So may I ask this, Brian? While you're working, go ahead, finish your writing.
You may have to scratch it out and write something else.
No, you. So if, in the process, I mean, we don't get involved with the minutia of the process, or at least try not to. An applicant brings a project forward that meets the ordinance to some form or fashion, and a waiver is needed or something, staff will bring it forward. Either bring it forward with a yes, a no, or a neutral. Would there be a time where an application wouldn't be brought forward for our consideration? If it met, if it was a use that fit in the zone, even though it might be a concern to the surrounding neighborhood, we certainly have had contentious hearing.
Yes, staff is always going to review a request, and we are going to draw from what we consider to be the best sources of information we can. In the case of waivers, the opinion of the sheriff's department and public safety department of the city, are key things. We're going to look at issues of what are the uses around it, what are the opinions, if we're able to get them from representatives of potentially affected sites nearby. We did that certainly on the one a month ago, but ultimately we're going to make our decision based on those technical factors. And when I say decision, it's a decision of how are we going to recommend. We will tell the applicant, we don't think we can support this. If you go forward, you go forward without our support. What do you want to do? Sometimes they wish to go forward and make their request.
But staff will always allow a project
yes.
to go forward.
We will
That's
never
my
block
question, really.
anybody from their opportunity to be heard. If they wish to be heard, they have that right. They put the application in. Obviously, the commission at times does not agree with staff's recommendation, and if they wish to make their case, so be it. On that. The thing that we as a staff generally will not do is get into a lot of issues with weighing what you might call the public testimony issues. In many cases, we aren't aware of it. If we get letters or things on a project, obviously we provide those to you. We let you know that we've looked at them. But as the commission, you weigh evidence, for lack of a better way to put it, from all kinds of angles. You have the applicant to consider, the testimony of residents, neighbors, people in the community, staff's recommendation and information. So yes, there's a lot of words under these sections, but what it won't do is give you a formula that tells you what your answer ought to be. It just tells you the things that you can and should consider in your evaluation.
I don't remember how many years ago it was, Mr. Ludicky, that we all sat around a table, you and I and some other people, some of whom are still alive, discussing alcohol beverage sales guidelines that everyone ultimately agreed to, and then lo and behold, they became an ordinance. Here we are. But there's no difference in our consideration, deliberation, and finding. Ours is no different than the city council's on appeal. It's their ordinance. I mean, we didn't write the ordinance, we administer it. So our judgment is based on our view of the ordinance and how we administer it, and the applicant or anyone else can appeal our decision and do. Matter of fact, the one last month is on appeal, I believe.
Yes, they have filed an appeal on it.
So that'll be heard sometime. Okay. Anything further from anyone on this? We've flushed it out?
Yes, did you wish to
Yes.
hear Mr. Kinsey's testimony?
I'm just trying to make sure we got everybody up here. So, Steve, you want to share with us anything? No? Okay,
Consider that consent.
very good. All right. So there's no specific action on this other than our discussion, and you're satisfied? You're clear as chocolate soda?
We will provide you with additional information and clearer information and staff reports pertaining to alcohol in the future.
All right, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Number 11, residential plan development RPD requirements.
Yes. Also, I think at the request of the commission, we've provided to you the text of the current ordinance in regards to RPDs. Having been here for so long, I can give you a little bit of background on the RPD language. I can tell you that it hasn't actually changed a whole lot since the mid-'80s, early 80s, I should say. I can identify for you several projects that were approved and ultimately developed under the RPD provisions. Those would include Portofino Estates, the partially completed project at 90th Street West and Avenue I, for any of you who are familiar with that area.
Say that again louder.
The project at 90th Street West and Avenue I on the southeast corner that was actually approved under the RPD provisions. Los Hermanos, that project was approved under the RPD provisions back in the mid-1980s also. And I do not know if this project was approved under the RPD provisions, but it was always pointed to as an example of the type of thing that it could allow. My guess is it was probably approved under a CUP, but might have served as a guide to the language that was drafted in the RPD. And it's kind of tucked away. It's on the side of Amargosa Creek between Lancaster Boulevard and Avenue J, for those of you who are familiar with it. Rather small project, but and actually sits in, I think, the R7000 zone, but it's an example of how the density provisions of R7000 were used to create kind of an attached development, but it's got open space areas and things on a very odd-shaped lot. So, and I think when here's a name from the past, when Paul Oker, who was the principal planner at the time, drafted the RPD provisions originally, I think one of the things that he was looking at was having a provision in the code that would allow someone to use effectively an odd-shaped piece of property like that, where they couldn't in any way meet the standard conventional development requirements.
We brought this up because we had questions on a RPD that we did in February. That was when we did that one that didn't meet the 15% of net land or parcel area. It was
right.
So you brought up Los Hermanos, and I was wondering, that says where the open space and trails, Is there anything in the RPD that says that it has to be available to the public, or is, because Los Hermanos is not,
No,
it's a gated community,
no, there is nothing that says it has to be available to the public.
so that would just be for, the RPD would just be for them,
Yes,
and their homeowners association fees or CC&Rs would cover that?
correct. They actually, if you're familiar a little bit with that, they have their trails system that they have, but they also have an area that is, I think it's right near the entrance. It was the densest stand of Joshua trees and maybe some junipers that existed on the property. And as part of their discussion with the city about how to develop the property, they agreed to leave that untouched. And it is right, I think it's right by the entrance, if I'm
Under the
not
tennis
mistaken.
courts, yeah.
So I guess it provides some visual benefit for the public, but it is still private.
So RPDs that don't have gates, the public would have an expectation of using them, or could the people that live there and pay for it run them off, or call the sheriff and say there's trespassing?
If well, Portofino has gates, actually, so it's probably a different question. But quite frankly, in a case where it's privately managed, privately maintained, privately owned by a homeowners association, yes, they have the right to control who's on it, who uses it, and if you want to use the term run people off of it, yes, they legally could do that.
Our streets are private in those communities, considered private, non-public.
Yes, Portofino's streets are
So when it snows, you have to get out there and shovel yourself?
I'm good at shoveling
All right.
snow.
What a gal.
So, I'm actually glad that we had a chance to bring this forward, because I think we missed a little bit of language when we pulled this over. We modified this somewhat when we did the most recent residential zones back in 2013. If you look under 340.C6, the language in that is supposed to say that where you have compensating characteristics, you can approve something with less than the 15% open space.
You're saying C6?
Yes. But it doesn't actually say that. It's missing some language. So that's the intent, and that's the way that it's read, which, quite frankly, is how you got an approval of Portofino, how you got an approval of Los Hermanos. They didn't meet the 15% requirement either. So,
Well,
but they had compensating characteristics.
but if you look at the,
layout and so forth.
if you look at the language, it talks about conventional development and the opportunity to enhance the conventional development methodology with the RPD, and the trade-off is amenities, design, creativity, yada, yada, yada. So if you take what we know to have been approved as RPDs in the community in the past and look at a new application as a comparison, one would have a challenge making that finding from my chair. Certainly the previous application, even though it's, it's continued, it'll come back to us eventually. The only other one that we approve, we have approved, hasn't been developed, is the project out on, 25th East and J something, J4, 8, somewhere in there?
Yes, it's approved but not developed.
Right. And that's an infill, if you will, rather than isolated.
Yes, there's development that generally surrounds it.
Mm-hmm. And the ones that, and the existing RPDs that you brought up, whether they're RPDs or CUPs, whatever, how they got there, are not in isolated, and were not isolated when they were developed.
Well, with one exception, the I and 90th project.
And look what that got us.
I'm not commenting on it, but
Us being the community and the challenges there with public utilities and marketability and.
Yeah, locationally, that's a challenging site. Even under conventional development, it would have been challenging.
Right. So, are you suggesting that some modifications need to be made to the ordinance then? Or?
Well, there's certainly a need to correct that one sentence to make it clear that, I guess what I would say is that you have these requirements that exist, but in certain areas of the code, you get some flexibility into how they're applied. In other words, you can have a very nice development that may not meet the 15% requirement, but the way they use the space, the way they connect it together, all of those kinds of things may compensate for the lack of the actual amount that's provided. And from staff standpoint and what we relayed to the applicant on the one that's still on continuance is, the commission didn't see that demonstrated, in the information that they provided.
A straight grid box design.
Right.
With no elevation, no pizzazz.
Right. Yeah,
Hard to sell.
nothing to justify the request, essentially.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to be unfair, certainly. But if the 1708-340 is very broad under A, it's extremely broad. Right? And it talks about, special methods of development, infill scenarios, connectivity for pedestrians and trails and all this.
Yes.
All these enhancements that.
Yeah.
Pretty clear that, at least to me, that we're looking for unique features beyond what you typically would find in a typical R1 7000 track map.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's the key. For example, on Portofino, one of the key design elements that was, I think, part of the reason that it was approved, there was a technique that had a little bit of following at the time. It was came out of the civil engineering world, coving. It was coving. It was this idea of these very tightly turned streets with the idea that you get this streetscape that's a little bit different, and you still get it without the same amount of cost, I think was part of the reason that the developer wanted to try this technique out. In fact, they were so pleased with how Portofino turned out, that's the reason they tried 90th and I. It was the same people, but it obviously didn't work out quite as well for them out there. Once again, locational issue.
But I think in the Portofino, wasn't there flood control issues as well that needed to be addressed that were somewhat unique and had to be?
Yeah, they were able to incorporate those into the
Right.
design.
And the street pattern design tends to slow traffic down internally,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. And, I guess the other thing, it wasn't without controversy. I mean, there were a number of existing residents in the area that didn't like the idea. They didn't like the idea of the project at all, despite all those features, so.
Is that the advantage of an RPD, is the developer can offer features that are different than a regular development, so it might attract a different type of buyer?
Yes, that's certainly one of the advantages. The idea on the RPD is we're going to give you more flexibility, but we're going to ask more from you. So they get a chance to weigh that.
In our strong town scenario, do they actually dedicate the streets and the valves and the pipes and the water to the city, so we have to maintain it? Or
Well, in Portofino's case, the streets are private. it's
The
their
public
responsibility
utilities
to
are
maintain
public,
them.
I
But I believe the sewers and so forth are public,
Yeah.
which, quite frankly, it's usually better if that's the case. I know there are some homeowners associations that maintain or have responsibility for sewer systems and things, but I'm going to tell you that usually doesn't work out too well.
So we don't fill potholes for RPDs?
Yeah, not in
Cassie
Portofino's
does that.
case, no. Or Los Hermanos, they're private also. Sorry. Yep.
All right, anything further on this one?
No, but, going forward, you're going to see, you've seen this one, but we've got several more that are in the process that you'll see within the next, 2 to 3 months?
Probably June, July-ish, but there's a total of 6.
Lucky you. Alrighty. Okay, let's see, where are we at here? Director's announcements, I believe, that's where we are.
You had mentioned earlier the one case that's appealed. That looks like it will go the first meeting in May to the city council.
Which one is that?
The alcohol appeal
Oh.
of Division and K. So just to make you aware of that.
Okay. All right. Commission agenda. I think I asked you at the staff meeting about the medical cannabis cultivation permit applications. I think you indicated there were some 30-plus that have been filed with the city so far.
Nobody's actually submitted an application package yet, but I believe it's somewhere north of 56 or 57 packages have been picked up by people.
When's the deadline? Do we know?
There's no deadline per se, but the city is going to start opening the submitted envelopes on May 1st. So in a certain sense, the earlier, the earlier you get it in by May 1st, the more likely, if you qualify for everything and then you're going to be ranked, the better chances you'll have of being one of the 5 local licenses and potentially CUPs that would be approved.
I see.
Is that process going to be open, or is it just going to be made behind closed doors? Like Cal City has, where they're going to be presented in front of the public and the public can ask questions. So nothing like that's planned for here.
No, we have there will be an evaluation team who's using a set of criteria that have had points assigned to it. And as a team, the city staff of, I think it's 5 or 6 people, will make the determination of where things should be ranked, and then we'll go from there. But no, it's not a public.
So you taking the lead on that?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Commiseration? Yes, thank you.
So why wouldn't we want that process to be open to the public?
It's not our choice.
Well, it seems to me like it's going to generate some, upset people in the community. We generated a ton of controversy over it by just adopting it.
My guess is they'll be here when the CUPs come before the public, and we'll get to direct traffic from there.
I can see that there's going to be charges of cronyism, nepotism, things like that, and it would seem to me like that ought to be a public process.
Well,
I'm
Vice
just
Chairman-
voicing it here for, whether it happens or not.
Well, it is a public
We're
process.
going to get those allegations lodged against us in any event, frankly. And to be quite honest, a lot of the information that is going to be submitted with the application forms is sensitive information that I don't think is appropriate to discuss in public. Every applicant and every officer or managing member or partner or whatever kind of entity it's going to be has to undergo the live scan criminal background check. We will be discussing that in the evaluation group. That's certainly not something that should be discussed in public. The financial well-being of the entity that's applying is going to be discussed. Again, that doesn't seem like a really appropriate thing to talk over in an open session.
Okay.
However, when a CUP comes before us, the licensing application will have been approved subject to the conditional use permit approval. So before we ever see it, whomever or whatever the entity is that applies for the conditional use permit will have been screened and approved conditionally. Right. So we will not be concerned about those elements of the process.
When it comes in before you for the CUP determination, that will all have been taken care of and evaluated in advance of that. You'll be looking at your standard, the standard things you look at when you determine whether a CUP should be issued.
So we don't have to have people out front with a placard saying, "Show us your tax return, Mr. Businessman."
You don't need to. That's not to say there won't be.
Now, wait a minute now. If the applicant is a public figure who has to file a Form 700, then, that would be available, right? If that was one of the licensees?
If that were the case, then yes, a Form 700 would have to be filed. Much of the documentation that will be submitted will end up being public record, but not during the evaluation process. It's the same as, for example, sending out for a request for proposal. While you're in the middle of the process and the negotiation process, none of those documents are subject to disclosure under the
They're
Public
not public
Records Act.
record yet.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Dandy. Do we have any other assignments coming down the road? And, oh, by the way, when would we anticipate, assuming somebody files for a license, or somebody's, what are we looking at? August, maybe, for the first one?
It's conceivable it could get to July. Conceivable.
So if 5 make it to July, or 5 going at the same time, or are we going to space them out, or what are you going to do?
I honestly don't know at this point, but I can tell you this: if they are ready to go, the direction is that you will have them.
So the July meeting schedule is something. So we're looking at July 17th. So clear your calendar for the 18th and 19th, folks. Just to be safe. It's possible that they will take some time. Anticipating public testimony. And assuming we want to limit the length of meetings. So I just maybe clear that. Okay, any other assignments that we need to worry about? No.
Not yet, but stay tuned.
Oh, great. You don't want to, no hints? No. Okay, fine. Thank you. All right. Public business from the floor. The opportunity now for anyone to address the commission on any items that are not agendized items. And if you'd fill out a speaker's card, you're welcome to speak. And if you don't want to fill out a speaker's card, you can speak to us too. We're happy to hear you. Do we have any speakers?
I have no cards.
Anybody want to chat? No? All right. Anything from the members? Nope. All right then. So it's now whatever time it is.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
I just want to thank our rangers for the assistance earlier today. We always appreciate everything they do for us.
Yeah, thank you. So it's now 6:41, and we'll adjourn to our special meeting here in this chamber for agenda review Monday, May 8th, 2017 at 4:30 p.m. Thank you all. Thank you
Thank you.
all for your participation, and catch your airplane.